Hello, everybody. My name is Rein. My background is actually in film, but right now all my time goes into producing content for virtual reality. So I represent the company Maru VR Productions, and today I'm going to talk to you about why I think virtual reality matters and why I think it's more than just a little novelty. It's not moving. Oh, sorry, I'm pressing the wrong thing. My bad. I don't do a lot of presentations. So a quick word about the company. We created the company 2016, and this means that we have been active a little bit more than a year, and we have created a little bit more than 10 VR projects. I think it's around 13 right now. Which, as far as I know, puts us at the first place of being the most productive VR company in Estonia, which is saying something about us, but it's also saying a lot about the VR market as a whole, as it's a very new market, and there are not a lot of players right now. But the clients who we have created content for include the City of Tallinn, City of Pärnu, Estonian Film Foundation, Elisa Estonia, Ministry of Energy of Georgia, and many others. And what we do is we create both real-time 3D graphics VR content, but also 360-degree videos with some game engine interactivity. So since my background is in film, and I'm also been doing games journalist for a long time, I like to think that I'm kind of this guy who's connecting the sensibilities of video game world and film world. And for some reason, VR seems to be a very good fit for that. So has worked for us well so far. But before I get a bit deeper into it, just so everybody is on the same page, I'm gonna give you this super short introduction to the history of VR. I promise it's really short. So while VR itself is nothing new, the new wave of VR kind of got started when this 17-year-old guy called Palmer Luckey made a VR headset out of old smartphone parts in his parents' garage in 2010. He had a very successful Kickstarter. And a few years later, Facebook bought his company for $2 billion, which was later revealed to be more close to the $3 billion. And a few years later, VR is now a global industry with a projected revenue of $75 billion by the year 2021. And some technology companies who have their own VR platforms include Samsung, Sony, Microsoft, Google, HTC, and many others. So that's all very nice, but my background is in storytelling, and I'm not a tech investor, so why should I care? Because creating content for this new medium is actually pretty hard. I have talked to a lot of filmmakers and game makers over the years about whether they're interested in VR or not. And I think the prevailing attitude is that people are kind of waiting what's going to happen. Like they're in between. And if you're good in whatever you do, it looks like it would be a better idea to focus on the things that are valuable right now, right away, rather than invest a lot of time and energy into this new medium, which might just disappear in a couple of years. And, I don't blame them. Because when you have this new medium, make no mistake, I don't think any new medium has been so accessible for content creation like as VR, because pretty much from the beginning you have Unity and Unreal Engine supporting VR games. And when I talk about video, it's these programs like Adobe Premiere or Adobe After Effects have the immersive video production tools built into them, and these are very easy to access. But still, these tools are very new, they are buggy, They have not been tested yet properly. And when you start right away, you're still kind of this beta tester that you will learn the hard way. You have to learn the ropes, and you're going to waste a lot more time than you would when you would get into the industry later. And also it's what you do with those tools, because the rules are different. As I said, my background is in film. I studied to become a film director, and the most important tool of a director is actually the frame. The edges of the frame and composition are these tools that you use to tell a story in film. And well, games have been using a lot of cinematic rules and tools over the years and have the same problem. So suddenly now you don't have the frame, because you might design an environment, but where the user is looking at is actually their own choice. So I could create this fantastic piece of art, and somebody would look at it in a headset and come to me and said, you know, I was looking at the floor the whole time. I was looking at the floor for 15 minutes and I think your movie sucks. And you know, it's my fault. I made it possible. What might be even worse is that you might actually get physically sick when you move the camera. I mean, it's not just that the audience didn't enjoy the film or game or whatever, they actually got physically sick and threw up later. So that might be pretty bad. And then, of course, if you're a business person, you get scared of the very small install base because it means that you have a very limited reach. You might create the best thing in the world and just nobody will see it because people don't have the VR headsets at home yet. And also there's this idea that VR is actually a bit gimmicky. So why would you waste 800 euros to buy a headset, then use it once, say, yeah, okay, that's kind of cool, and then put it on the shelf and let it collect dust. So there are a lot of issues, and approaching VR content creation might not seem like the most easiest thing to do. But looking at the history, I found a few similarities with film. Because you see, when in 1895, when the Lumiere brothers invented this machine to capture moving images and reproject them on a sheet, then nobody would have ever guessed what's gonna come out of it. And also the first films were kind of gimmicky. On the left here, you see the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, which is probably the first time somebody used an editing trick. It's a 15-second film. It starts with the Queen of Mary, the actress, walking to the place of the execution, kneeling down, putting her head on the piece of wood, and then the executioner raises up the axe, and then you have an edit. And the actress is replaced with a mannequin. And the executioner swings down the axe and chops off the head. And people looking at this thought that this actress sacrificed her life for this 15-second film. It was amazing. And the second example is the arrival of the train to the station of Le Ciotat, which was just a train arriving. It didn't even come straight to the camera, it's a little bit sideways, right? But the legend says, the legend might be over-exaggerated a little bit, but the legend is that people from the cinema actually ran away screaming and panicked because they thought that the train is going to come through the wall and kill them all. So when this kind of entertainment first came, it wasn't seen as very high art. It was a bit of like a market fair entertainment, where you would go to a village fair and then you would have the option whether you pay money to buy a ticket to see the bearded lady or go see this projection technique, which also might seem like, yeah, it's fun once, but now I have seen it, so what? 120 years later, this has become the standard format how we get our news, our entertainment, our everyday life information, nobody would have guessed that there would be films, animations, documentaries, reality shows, and that we would have people like Steven Spielberg or Leonardo DiCaprio or whoever who actively impacts the way we live and think about things globally. And it all began with this little gimmick thing. So we don't know where virtual reality is going in a way, because it might turn into something that we can't even imagine yet. So why VR? Why is VR so special and different from the mediums that we already have? There are these 4 buzzwords that kind of appear whenever somebody's talking about VR. And these are immersion, presence, agency, and also empathy. Well, immersion means that everywhere you look around you, you kind of see this persistent world. The idea of virtual reality technology, of course, is that when you look to the left, the picture also turns this way, the virtual camera. And so while the higher functions of your brain know that you are not physically in that world, your basic brain still kind of believes it. And this gives you the feeling of presence. You feel like you're actually present inside this digital world where the creator wants you to be. A good example of this is the first time I ever used a VR headset. It's the most typical demo is the roller coaster, and I remember getting actually physically sick in my stomach when I looked down upon the ledge and seeing this great height. But recent example for me has been, I've been playing a lot of Skyrim VR. It's awesome. And I find that I'm a very different player. My activities as a player are very different from when I used to play the 2D screen version. For example, I was adventuring in the world and it started raining in VR. And I felt this, this minor discomfort, like it's a little bit cold and kind of, I didn't feel good. And there would be other NPC characters, I see them walking by, and my mind just sort of uncontrollably, my brain kind of starts to create their emotions or imagine those for me. So I would think that this AI brain is also feeling the same way, because he or she is in the same world as me, and then I go to the tavern and it feels nice and cozy, and I would just sit there and wait for the rain to end. So this is not something I would usually do inside a video game. So something has changed, something is different. And one word that's also associated with this is agency. It means that you feel like you are part of the world and you matter in this world, and you can impact this world with your choices or actions. And all of this kind of creates empathy. Empathy towards the universe where you're in, and also the characters that you participate the activities with. For example, this filmmaker, his name is Chris Milk, created these 360 videos from a refugee camp. And the idea was, he coined the term empathy machine, which a lot of VR creators don't really like, but the idea is that when you are inside this virtual refugee camp, then it becomes something else than just reading a newspaper article saying that, these people in refugee camps have a pretty bad life. So you would actually see what it's like and feel it more from their point of view. So this creates empathy. And me as a storyteller, as a content creator, I feel like it's my responsibility to use this kind of tools, because as a director, it's my duty to use the best tools available for me to tell a story. And so when you have this technology that puts people into your made-up world and makes them feel more immersed into it, then this isn't just like the technology that I should be kind of interested in. This is the technology that I should be running towards. Because why don't you want that? the directors and lead designers have so many little techniques and tricks and tools available to them to create that, and these tools are not as powerful. I mean, you have music, you have sound design, you have color, you have all this background story of a world, and you try what a filmmaker or a story creator does is that they use these tools to create a believable world, and then suddenly it becomes a lot easier. So yeah. But there's a lot of clickbaity articles right now. Every tech kind of site, not every one of them, but a lot of them are proclaiming that VR is dead because that's what brings clicks. But VR is very far from that. VR platform is pretty healthy and it's growing very steadily. In Q3 in 2017 was the first time that 1 million non-mobile head-mounted devices were shipped. And in 2018 will be the starting point of standalone HMDs. So you don't need a phone or a computer to connect with a headset. You buy a device and that's it. There will be 3 devices at least this year, Oculus Go, Lenovo Mirage Solo, and Vive Focus. And the first generation of headsets actually is now 2 years old. So it's very probable that we will see a second generation in the next year or in 2020. And the tech is only getting better. VR right now is, I think it's pretty good for a first generation, but it's still clunky. There are wires, it's expensive, the screens and resolutions, everything will be better. Hopefully the software side also. Hopefully they will be also cheaper. And in the end, at one point, there will be this critical point where VR goes to the masses. It hasn't been this wildfire that some evangelists have kind of overhyped it to be. But the market is very healthy and there are a lot of reasons why it should get better besides tech. One of them is demographics. People start to live alone more, which is kind of sad, but this is how the big families kind of are a thing of the past. And people need home entertainment because it's too expensive to go out every night. Then you have self-driving cars, long trips, you need some kind of activity. Airplanes, a lot of airlines are looking into putting virtual reality headsets into the first class seats so that people have something to do while they're flying. And all of that kind of brings the need for more VR content. And bear in mind that Sony, Samsung, HTC, all these companies aren't only in this business to sell you pieces of plastic. They are trying to control the platforms, the content platforms. So it means that they are starving for huge amounts of content, the same way that the Apple and Google are interested in controlling the app stores and Play stores, and it's not so much about selling you tech. Well, it's an important part, but it's not the only part. So good content is needed, and good skills for doing that, for creating that content, are also valuable. And well, what we do in Maru VR is the non-gaming applications, and there's a very growing interest in that regard also, because a lot of the different fields have been looking into virtual reality for decades. And some of them have tried to create their own crappy VR. And now that the technology is widely available, they are trying to harness that technology to create different kind of real-world applications. For example, education, military training, medical therapy, art, design, architecture. These are all fields that can greatly benefit from the VR applications. And this is kind of something that we're trying to do. Sometimes a customer, a company would come to us and you could understand that they want VR because VR is still kind of like a buzzword, and it makes for a good press release to say that our company now has created something VR. and it doesn't really matter what it is. But what we try to find is these real-world applications where VR kind of creates new value and makes, it sounds cheesy, but makes the world a better place, right? So I want to finish with a few thoughts. First thing is that everything in VR is a prototype. Of course, there are a lot of best practices, some what Madis and others were talking about here also. And there are a lot of success stories and failure stories, and you should learn from them. But I think a good way to approach VR is kind of like anything is possible. Then kind of make up your own rules as you go and discover what is possible, because VR is still in its very early stages. It's 2 years on wide release markets, and this is a very short time when you compare it to the cinemas 123 years. And we might use VR in the future in ways that we simply can't imagine yet. So the reason for that is all VR is interdisciplinary. It means there is no VR discipline, there are no VR specialists and experts. When film came, then it was also a combination of other kind of disciplines. You could argue that film is a combination of photography, theater, and radio. In the same way, VR is a combination of what we know about games and films and computer graphics and all these different fields, and we're kind of putting it together, but in a process we can create something totally new and totally different experience from what we already have. And it's very tempting to have this kind of slogans, like I hear a lot like VR is only going to be huge if VR porn takes off, or VR is going to fail if it's not wireless. And it's a little bit more tricky. It's not that simple. There is a combination of a lot of different factors that play together, and at some point something is going to explode and turn it to something, and suddenly VR is this thing that everybody uses all the time. I mean, things like Ready Player One or even the Knuckles meme, they help a lot to get mass adoption closer, but mass adoption isn't this value in its own. It has to come when the market is ready and when the content is also ready. So everything is connected. And one thing I've been kind of trying to keep an eye on everything that goes on in VR for about 5 years. And every now and again I find something super obvious that I didn't realize before. And then I feel embarrassed because I should have understood that from the start. But I've kind of come to accept that because it's completely okay not to know everything right away. The road to knowledge, I mean, is that. If you would know everything right away, then would be no point in getting new information. But sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow to accept that there are still things I don't know. And last but not least, not to get all preachy in here in a tech conference, but I would exercise some caution and responsibility because, well, first of all, it's kind of a tabula rasa. We're looking at the clean sheet and we can do things differently this time. So, internet has turned into this great mess, cynical mess of algorithms, and VR is kind of a chance to do things better, but also because VR can give you emotionally a much stronger response from a user, and this can be a very dangerous tool in a way when you find yourself in a situation when you have a choice on how to design something, on what kind of effect it will have on people. Then when you come to a different world, for example, mobile game world, where it's an oversaturated market and you have to do things one way to get any attention at all, in VR market you have more freedom. and maybe that's a good place to kind of rethink some of the things that you're doing and see if maybe there is another way. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. And maybe you have some questions. Do we only have this one mic?
We just have one mic, so maybe I'll just pass it around. And then you can shout.
Thank you, Rein, for your very interesting talk. I have this question. As we know from film and all kinds of different media.
Okay, yeah, I'm hearing you.
So, as we know, there are stories which are better suited for different media, right? So, there are stories which are organically told through theater, through film, or through photography, and so on. And there are specific features to those stories which make them suitable for this or that medium. So, do you see anything like that in VR stories? Can you describe a story which would be more organic for VR form than, for example, for a film form or for a game form?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I described, a person can react to the same content very differently based on what platform it is on. And when we're talking about VR or VR stories, then one thing I would say is that VR is better for atmosphere, because you feel the atmosphere a lot better when you are trying to tell a story that consists of little details, and these details are very, very easy to miss in VR, whether it's film content or 3D content. If your story relies on very little details that the player can easily miss, then a good story is like one day A happened, and because of that B happened, and because of that C happened, and when you miss this one crucial part, then suddenly the train of thought is gone and people are out of your story and they're not enjoying it anymore. So I would advise against these small minor details and more about stories about locations and atmospheres. But at the same time, I don't want to be too narrow, because as I said, we have so many different genres with film. We might have so many different genres in VR, so I wouldn't constrain myself too much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there was somebody over here. Yep.
Hello. So I have some multi-level question. One is with the upcoming standalone headsets, right? Are they going to sync other already existing headsets? Because in that case, you only need to buy one device and not be dependent on the other. That's the first level.
It kind of depends. I think Oculus Go is something that I'm really waiting for, and I have a lot of faith in, because forcing people to buy a certain mobile, smartphone, it doesn't work. When somebody is an iPhone person, then they're not gonna prefer a Samsung or Google phone just because it comes with VR capabilities, but they might buy this separate €200 Oculus Go headset. So this might broaden the market quite a bit, and also technically it's way better to have a dedicated device than cram the VR SDK into all these processes that are going on in the phone, which is a lot. So I don't think. Yeah, I think they will be side by side, but standalone headsets will give a great option for like a normal user.
And the second part is, so we all know people who are dreamers out there who want the equipment from, for example, Ready Player One to be out tomorrow. And there's a big hype, and a lot of developers are working to make that happen, right? What is the probability that the hype will overdo it and VR, new technology will sink the VR coming into the VR industry?
Sorry, what was the last part of the question?
What's the probability of VR sinking the VR? So getting all of the new technologies out there while market is not ready, while new products are not ready. What's the probability of that happening?
Well, you could say that the first headsets already were in a situation where the devices were actually kind of better than people expected from the first version to be. But when will the moment exactly happen when it surpasses this critical moment? It's hard to say. It's a combination of different things. For example, when the best VR headset, the perfect VR headset comes out, when the technology is ready, it might be that by that time the interest has already kind of waned and it will not explode until some very special piece of content comes out. For example, like what happened with Pokemon Go and AR, right? Everybody had kind of heard about AR, but they couldn't put it into context because there wasn't this piece of content that they could actually relate to. So the answer would be that it depends on a lot of things.
Okay, one more question and then we'll have a coffee break.
I was wondering, in your opinion, is there a killer application for VR already, and something that it's by itself worth buying a VR headset, and if so, which one is it?
You mean gaming application or non-gaming?
Not necessarily, even a VR experience.
Well, gaming is the most obvious answer, and there are a lot of good games because it's a very, it's a very obvious thing that gamers are kind of used to buying new tech and wasting a lot of money on it and buying new stuff every year. So it's a very obvious market for new tech, but when we would talk about non-gaming, then definitely some sort of training simulations seem to me like the most obvious answers, because training in VR can give you this isolation of other senses that are necessary, for example, to get something into your muscle memory. Like for big companies who have to instruct a lot of people. I think a good example recently was a train company in Amsterdam who trained their crew to open some sort of an emergency hatch kind of thing when somebody with a disability wanted to get on the train. And people learned how to do that in VR and were able to do it fast enough without ever seeing this system in real life. So creating this learning environment where you don't have other things bothering you and you can actually use controllers to get something into a muscle memory is a very obvious thing to use VR for me. But widely available applications, I would say there are a lot of little niche products, but nothing as groundbreaking that you have to go out and buy VR headset right now. But they will come.